Everyone needs a pencil. Don't go anywhere without a pencil. We're going to be performing a little experiment based on the as-if principle. As-if principle was coined by a psychologist, William James, a long time ago. And basically it states that, it says, if you want a quality, you should act as though you already have it. For this particular experiment, we're only going to do that in a positive sense. But, you should, normally when people talk about emotions, they think that they are having a certain emotion. For instance, they find something funny, and then they laugh, and their body responds. The as-if principle states that the reverse is also true. So, if your body, for instance, uses the laughing muscles, you will also find things funny. And we want you to find this funny, so we're only going to do the positive part of this particular experiment. So, if you have the pencil, put it in your mouth, between your teeth. Right? Don't put it between your lips, because then you'll frown, and you will not like it. Put it within your teeth. And this will help you to laugh. That's good. And we need you to have this positive feeling because, like some other presentations that you've seen today, we're going to have a bit of a controversial statement to start off with. Our presentation is going to be, well,
okay,
maybe you should...
I'll introduce it. As you can see on the screen, sometimes a very directive, just do it approach is the best way to engender and cultivate an agile mindset. That's the premise of our talk today. A little more starkly put, enforcing practice can lead to an agile mindset.
So, now you're allowed to take out the pencil. Thank you very much. It should be noted that the experiments have proven that this effect is lasting, so you'll have a great presentation. And you'll also have a great weekend. You're welcome.
Before we go any further, however, this statement is very bold. What is an agile mindset, Wouter?
Yeah, that was a bit of a conundrum for us. Most of this presentation is going to be within the background of the project that we did. And most people who have done an agile transformation, they know this feeling, right? Things are starting to click. People actually are picking up the process and way of working. There's a positive vibe, and all of that is completely unmeasurable. So we're going to keep it completely unmeasurable. But for me, I think an agile mindset is something you have to be working in a matter of continuous improvement along the values of the Agile Manifesto.
I also have a definition because, as you said, we continue to find it quite vague. My definition of an agile mindset is a mindset that is customer focused, empirical, collaborative, and above all determined to improve. So,
yeah, that'll do.
Yeah,
I think it's going to remain vague. I don't think that there's anything in that mindset can't be really well defined. So we're not going to try. Right?
We are not. Who are we, by the way?
Oh yeah. I'm Wouter.
I'm Ciarán.
And both we're agile coaches. We work in the Netherlands for this company, Ecology, and we usually get involved with agile transformations, or as in this particular case, projects that are run along agile lines.
Yes. And what we hope to do today, we hope to demonstrate, as we said, that sometimes a very directive approach to enforcing practices can lead to mindset. How we're going to do that is we're going to describe the context, the project we were in, some of the change initiatives that we took along the way, and demonstrate via what we found from retrospectives, what we got back from the people in the retrospectives, how mindset went from completely not agile to at least burgeoning agile along the way.
Yeah, and the way that happened, the process that happened, was the surprise for us. So again, the basic statement is that just a little bit of theory X can be just what the doctor ordered. Along the way, we'll have some theory to support that. Decisive principle is one part of that. Cynefin framework is another.
We'll refer to Cynefin. We'll also refer at least to Ciarán and the Dreyfus learning model as we know it. We will only refer.
Yeah. Because basically, when we were doing this, we were very well surprised, and we needed something to support the findings. So let's let's get to the project. Yes.
Yes, the project. A large insurer, a project comprising 75 to 80 people, sometimes a few more. In fact, it was a program, a Solvency II program, if you know what Solvency II is. Basically, the EU, I think, decided that if you were to, if you had certain risks in the field, you needed a certain amount of money in cash to basically cover those risks. This was a project to build a system to calculate how much money this particular insurer needed given the risks that they had in the field.
Yeah, and it was, if I may say so, pretty much a standard waterfall project. At least when we joined the project, it was 9 months into the project. Nothing had been delivered. No one knew what needed to be delivered. Everything was outsourced to 3 different parties. Who actually, for the most part, hadn't even spoken to each other. Importantly, the customer, the insurance company, had no idea what the status was. So, pretty much run-of-the-mill. But there was a difference. The customer actually didn't like this. And they got in a very high-powered project manager, which was not one of us. But they got in a very, very high-powered project manager, external, but who knew the company well. That guy didn't know much about Agile, but he looked at the project and said, okay, the requirements are uncertain, the way of working doesn't work, the state is uncertain. I've heard good things about this Scrum thing. Can we set that up as a risk management tool for this project? And that is what happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, that appealed in the situation we're in. We're talking about an insurance company who were involved in risk and managing risk. This project manager came up with an idea as to how to manage risk. That's where we came in. We and several other Scrum Masters / Agile coaches. We went through the context as just described to you, and we decided that we were acting in the chaotic domain. So this is the Cynefin framework. I'm sure most of you know it. Is there anybody in the room who hasn't seen this framework before? All right.
Now you'll have to explain it.
I'll have to explain it ever so briefly because it's difficult stuff. On one level, on the other level, it's not. That's the beauty of complexity. Basically, this is a framework for deciding how to act given the context you're in. Depending on the nature of your context, you will act in a different fashion. You can see a couple of different. This here is basically the title for the category. This is the nature of the action you take, given that you've determined you're acting in that category. We determined that we were working in the chaotic category because, as Wouter has explained, nobody knew where we were, nobody knew where we were going. In fact, they didn't even know each other, and we were being asked to introduce Scrum, which was completely new to everybody. So, with a certain confidence, we said we are acting in the chaotic domain, so we need to do something. See how it's going, and react. That something was
something called, well, you probably maybe you've heard of it. Jeff Sutherland talks about this quite often. It's called shock therapy Scrum, and it's a load of fun. No, basically what you do is you take the standard rules of Scrum and apply them rigorously in the shortest sprint time possible, so that you can do very quick learning and very quickly find out all the issues that are there. And that's what we took as a guideline.
Yes, which meant in our particular situation that we got these vendors who were internationally located. We got them all to Amsterdam. We basically got them all in the same room, at least initially. We turned the 5 or 6 projects that this program originally comprised, we turned into 3 different backlogs. We had 2 development teams, each with its own backlog, and a so-called integration team. And we asked them all, actually told them all that we were going to work as follows. 1 week sprints, test and document in sprint, observe all ceremonies religiously, including specifically and especially the review and the retrospective.
Yeah. Now, if you've ever done this type of transformation before, you should imagine that we have, excluding the people working on the product owner side, we had about 50 people that were freshly flown in, didn't want to be in Amsterdam, didn't want to be in that room, certainly didn't want to, as we did, get mixed up with the other guys, because those were the guys they were blaming before for not getting anything done. And then work in a way that they didn't want to work in. Now, again, this is usually quite hard to overcome, up to impossible. Yes.
And we didn't do this at the time. We have to be very honest about this. This is retrospective wisdom, if you like. But assessing the mindset as we observed it at that moment, if you like, not necessarily at that moment, but within a week or 2 of having done all this, it was obviously not where we needed to be. If we went into grooming, for instance, or refinement, I understand that English speakers have a problem with the word grooming these days. It was such that everybody knew what to do, right? And yet we could spend an hour and a half talking about any given story and not achieve any kind of agreement as to what that should be. Another thing that was often said to us about grooming in retrospectives was it was inefficient, I hate that word at this stage, to have the whole team in grooming. These people were used to chain of command, if you like. One person who has the knowledge talks to one other person who has the knowledge, who tells the minions what to do, etc. Planning, again, mindset was obvious in planning. The environment, the project managers and company basically wanted to dictate the scope of any given sprint, and to be honest, the team expected them to do so.
If you have a retrospective, then people can raise issues, and the issues then are, of course, sprint is too short. You can't do testing within the sprint. Can we do testing? Can we do a separate testing sprint or a hardening sprint?
Or can't we have stories whereby I, a colleague of yours in the same team, write a spec so that in the next sprint you can actually do the work?
Yes, and that's all very much an indication that we don't have an agile mindset. Just to emphasize that. So the special thing here was that we could say, yeah, tough luck, just do it. Which is kind of unusual. The customer made that possible. The customer actually took on delivery responsibility for this project, taking it away from the vendors, taking away lots of the contractual discussions that would ensue from that. And that allowed us to let everyone get to work, whether they like it or not. Now, to get back to the as-if principle, yes. To get back to that, as I was saying before, sometimes the actions you perform inform your mindset, your emotions, your emotional state. This is something that goes surprisingly far. Another experiment that was used to investigate whether this was true was by a German who apparently had a good sense of humor. And it was about, any Germans in the room? Yes. Yes. My apologies for the insult. Most of the audience is in English, so it usually works. Anyway, this very smart German psychologist wanted to investigate whether that was true, and he investigated that for love. Yeah, love is a complicated subject, but the actions people perform when they're in love tend to fall into certain categories, like sitting in fairly dark areas, staring into each other's eyes, and playing footsie. So, yeah, it's almost physical. So, if you're a psychologist and you want to prove this, then you turn that around. So, what would happen if you let people sit in dark rooms, staring into each other's eyes, and play footsie? Now, if you do that directly, that is hard to prove. So you lie.
You get you arrested.
Definitely. I'm pretty sure that this was in a laboratory type of environment, but you have to be very careful. Don't try this at home. So what he did, which was very smart, was he got people in to investigate poker. Not planning poker, but that was the only poker cards that I had. That's it. Not a planning person. Not planning poker, but he let them play poker, and he let them play poker in a dark room, and he took some of the people apart and he said, "Okay, you guys are going to cheat. So you have these signals. You can stare into each other's eyes for 5 seconds, or you can touch your feet in different ways underneath the table." And then he let them play poker. I am assuming that to keep things honest, he let the other people cheat in different ways, but I don't actually know. It doesn't say. But the great thing is that at the end of that, the people who have been cheating in this particular way have a much higher attraction to each other. So, well, it's so much for the dating advice.
The point being that for our team, as we just described, we basically observed a similar process. We enforced these practices. They started on complaining loudly, bringing all their great intelligence, by the way, to arguments as to why this really wouldn't work and so on and so forth. But within 4 to 6 weeks, we saw that it was working.
Yeah, we were actually delivering software.
Week in, week out.
Yeah, from first sprint on, first sprint we had a demo for one story and it was over in 10 minutes. But there was something and it was demoable, and afterwards that grew and we got testing working in sprint. So the practices were done. And
Were successful.
Were successful.
But not only that, we saw changes in mindset, because as we described in the first retro or two, basically people wanted to remove the constraints. And when we were 4, 5, 6 weeks in, we started to see a shift. People were really looking for improvements within the confines of the constraints. So instead of saying we need a longer sprint, or we need to test in subsequent sprints, for instance, or we need to write spec stories, people were coming up with improvements of the nature. Well, if we help the product owner describe a story whereby the different vendors can work together within the team, then we can avoid the spec, for instance. People understood that testing was part of specification as well, and we saw early signs of mindset that appealed. People were free.
Well, almost. But this was only after about 2 months into the project, so we were definitely feeling good about our progress. And then we ran into the next issue. We were expecting quality issues. Of course, if you get a bunch of people not used to working agile and have them work in short sprints, even with testing, manual testing in the sprint, you know that if you keep going at that pace, you will get quality issues. So we were expecting that the team also was starting to raise their worries about this. There were more suggestions of having a hardening sprint. There were definitely worries about we're never doing a regression test. We don't know what's exactly happening, which of course is again, wonderful, great, people were worried about quality. We gently, well, we pushed this into the direction of test automation.
Of test automation, and which was for the people involved was a new step. And this gets back to the context story. What we were observing was that within the context that we had described for people, they were quickly able to start looking for solutions that would work. However, when that context wasn't broad enough, it was really up to us to say, well, we need to take this step to go further. That is corresponds with learning models, Ciarán, Dreyfus. In the beginning, you give context-free instruction. People do what they're told because they don't understand context. Doing stuff for a little while lends context, helps them to understand the context in which they're operating and how to improve. But as you come to like a phase shift, what you see is that people don't come up with the ideas at least quickly enough in our situation. So every now and then we prompted them. Automated testing or test automation was one of those. However, we did lose the battle on tooling.
Yeah, there was already some discussion before we joined, and we didn't manage to change that. So there was a very expensive tool selected that was very much unsuited to any type of batch processing that was working. Actually, it was a UI tool. And it was very expensive, so you can pretty much know that not everyone in the team will have the possibility of using it. But even so, we thought we had a handle on this particular issue. Kenan would say we figured it would be in
the complicated domain. We understood the problem. The problem was well known. It had been tackled before. The only thing we had to do was get the right experts in, allow them to analyze, sense, and respond, and everything would be hunky-dory.
Yeah, which is kind of the default way of working for that domain. Get some experts, they will know what to do, adapt that to the situation, and continue. So we got in some experts on this particular tool set, and we have been very successful with the approach so far. So we told them, yeah, and from now on we want automated tests for all the new development in Scrum.
We as Scrum Masters, which is very inappropriate, basically changed the definition of done. We said stories are done only when they're under auto test.
And again, pretty much the same thing happened as before. Lots of protests. Completely impossible. And we saw a drop in velocity while people were getting up to speed. The experts were actually writing with the framework needed to control the application. And pretty soon we recovered, and we had a fairly good velocity going in.
Not only that, we saw again changes in mindset, which were very encouraging, because as we said, we brought in these experts, we put them into the integration team, which was Wouter's team at the time, and they started doing their thing. But very quickly, the testers and developers basically in the other team started saying, look, this is no good. We need to collaborate much more closely with these people. We want to learn what they're doing so that we can also do it. We need to get more flexible as an operation. And that's all pointing towards collaborative focus on improvement, etc., etc.
Yeah, and these things were done. Teams asked for it. They were formed. The automation experts started pairing with the existing testers who were used to manual testing, and pretty soon those guys were also doing the test automation, which helped get the velocity back up to speed. So. Again, we were fairly happy about that part of it. But then, so then the whole thing fell over. Because it turns out that not only was the tool wasn't very suited for the application wasn't very suited for being tested because there were many custom components that we could not change or refactor or whatever.
Very large batches,
yes.
Very large components.
So the tests were also slow. And the experts that we brought in were experts for the tool, but they had never worked in an agile project before, and they were not experienced in very quickly building up an automated test set and keeping that test set up to date, changing it very often.
So our velocity went from reasonable 5-6 stories a week. We were doing no estimation, by the way, counting stories. Went from 5-6 stories a week to no stories when we introduced automated testing. Climbed back up again to 4 or 5 stories, a little lower than initially, and then fell over. Didn't go all the way back to 0, but down to 2 or 3 stories per team.
Yeah. So the good news was the good news was that when that happened, people reacted again within the mindset that we would like. Well, mostly, but the suggestions were having a stand up every morning to review the nightly run results with everyone who's going to commit, basically.
And we introduced 0 defects, at least as a goal, and the corresponding action, basically stop the line. So when there were regression errors, we weren't building we weren't at least testing by every single build during the day, but when we got regression errors, we stopped the line. The regression error, whether it was a test error or an actual system error, got the highest priority in the team standard that day.
Yeah. Still though, this particular issue was, I think, the major issue in the project, and it really took like 5-6 months before it got under control. And a large part of getting it under control was actually changing the tool set. But that could only happen at the very end and for parts of the system. So next time, start off with Cucumber and everything's fine. But anyway.
But despite all this, I mean, it sounds a bit like we'd gotten into a terrible mess, basically. But as I said, every team was still delivering 2 or 3 stories a week. And we had very initially had some very heavy conversations with the project management people about how to approach scope.
Yeah,
namely,
one of the agile principles, maximizing the amount of work not done, right? That's a very important one. Lots and lots and lots of discussions. We started off with the principle of walking skeleton. We did not manage to sell that. But after a lot of discussion, we ended up with something that we dubbed the skinny approach. And that was fairly useful.
Not only useful, it was basically riotously successful, because when we came there in June of 2012, people were looking at getting the system into production for the figures of 2013. So you're talking October, November 2013. It was now October 2012.
Yeah. And it basically calculated all the figures that were needed. It did not do that with a very nice user interface. It did not do all the validations of the data that was coming in. But if you're in a big insurance company and you want that one figure, and the difference in the figure with the previous model can be up to $1 billion in money you can spend, that's a fairly good result, right? In fact, they were rather enthusiastic about that. And at the same time, actually, we completely forget about telling that, but we were also working on continuous delivery. Not that we were doing 70 releases per week, was doing that, but yes, so no, we weren't. But we could roll out a full new environment within a week, and we could do a couple of releases per day, which, if you're talking with all the legacy stuff that we were using, it was a pretty good result. And for the customer, that meant that, oh yeah, we can do the 2012 figures, and oh, if that's so easy, let's also do the 2011 figures again, because now we can free up money retrospectively, because apparently that's how finance works. I still don't quite get that, but anyway, they were very enthusiastic, and we completely ran into a wall, of course, because that meant that we had to support, but it was actually 3 live systems at the same time, which were not very user-friendly. So,
your team?
My team. I was doing the IT integration team. I like the whole continuous delivery stuff and all that. So we had everything under control and publicized and whatnot. But the system still was fairly hard to use and fell over depending on data that was coming in, because not all data validations were in. And that meant that my team was not having a good time. And
Suddenly doing overtime?
they were doing overtime. And we had to do a lot of, how do you call that? Fighting, I think. Firefighting, or we had to do a lot of fighting to prevent working over the weekends and all that. And what we did then was, at the end of every sprint, of course, have a retrospective, and the team tried to find ways around it. And they did the regular stuff within the scope that they knew. They actually suggested pairing, so that more people could help out with the support tasks. They suggested and did some discussions with the product owner to be able to deprioritize things. But the thing was, the product owner didn't know what was going to happen the next day. So yeah, because it was a system in use and you find out new stuff every day. So after 2 sprints of zero velocity, I suggested we try Canada. Because the team was actually getting a lot of stuff done, it just wasn't showing, and it was the product owner, while he was changing priorities, was complaining that that thing that had been committed to for that week wasn't done. Now, we didn't do that quite the normal way again, because product owner actually liked the fact that something had been committed, and the relationships weren't good enough that he then said, oh yeah, it's my fault that you didn't get your commitment. So we basically said, well, if you cannot give a commitment for the priorities, we're not going to apply. And after a bit of fighting, that worked. And we did all the regular stuff, right?
Yes, it worked in the sense that at one point the integration team had a velocity of 0, in the sense that the stories they had planned will not be delivered. But within a couple of weeks of having introduced Kanban, they were again not only meeting all the support requests, but they were actually delivering stories again, which was surprising, given that other than Kanban as a management process, nothing had changed. They were so successful, in fact, and the same problem had spilled over into the development teams, in the sense that not only the integration team was supporting the runs, but the development teams were, because testers and analysts were involved in supporting the runs. But any run could actually generate a new request for functionality, which needed to be actioned immediately, obviously. So for the dev teams, it also became very, very difficult to commit to a scope at the beginning of the week. A planning horizon of a week was basically too much for the business at that moment. They saw what was going on with the integration team, and they said, we like this, we want to do this, and they went for it. And again, they were also successful in their implementation.
And at that point, they were starting to do changes, also changes to the way that Kenan was working. We did the regular things. We had classes of service based on different types of requests. We had WIP limits, work in progress limits. People were actually changing their process, the boards, fairly regularly. We kept the normal flow for the normal rhythm, I should say, cadence, for retrospectives, but of course not for planning.
And as you can see from this list here, the changes didn't stop with Kanban ×2. There were ongoing problems with the quality of the stories we were taking into sprint, or onto the billboard, if you will, at a given moment. And the teams kept coming with this, and they kept looking for ways to improve this. We eventually implemented specification for example, which lent itself to a particularly obvious process, which we implemented again using Kanban, and at that point we got the PO team involved. And we gave them the grooming process, if you like.
Yeah, it's a very nice feeling to see the PO, which you notice now that you've heard we had quite a few discussions with about the process. And it's a very great feeling to see him every morning stand in front of the ready board and actually lead the stand-up and point out to people that they were going over their limits and completely going into that process.
So I guess, given the time, to conclude, what we hopefully have demonstrated today, briefly, is that practice, even when it's enforced, can lead to mindset, as long as there is some chance of early success, and reflection is institutionalized, and even, especially in the beginning, guided.
Yeah, and if I may, as a very last anecdote, because that's one I'm particularly proud of. We had all these people coming in from different companies, and at the end of this project, which we were involved for a year, this is like 5 months in. So this kept on ongoing. But at the end of this project, we had to switch over to a maintenance mode. There was one team was going to be left, and that was going to do maintenance and smaller changes. And we were involved in selecting the people for that. And once that selection was known, quite a few of the people that were not in that team actually came to me and to other people, and they said, why am I not in that team? Which I said, you're a developer and you want to be in a maintenance team? What's wrong with you? But the answer to that was, I think, very telling. He said, well, if not in this particular project, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to the main company, and I'm going to be in one of the normal projects. And that means I'm going to be working overtime, it's going to be all unclear, it's going to be a fucking mess. I want to be here. And I think that is the clearest proof that you can have that you made some sort of impact. Which, for me, is the conclusion.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No? Could it be true?
Oh, sorry, let's have one. You said you rejigged your Kanban board. Was that you guys, or was that the guys that you trained?
The guys that we trained, specifically with specification by example, very quickly the guys themselves wanted to have the policies and splits. They wanted to know what did it mean to go from this step to the next step, and they wanted it written down so that there was no need to confer with anybody outside the people doing this.
Yeah. And it's not to say that things didn't go wrong there sometimes, right?
Yeah.
At one point someone wanted an extra column that was basically doing collecting all the data and putting it into a requirements document, and spent some time on that. We're also not saying that everyone there was completely convinced and fully going out and spread the agile word, but a very good chunk were, and you never get everyone. And even the ones that were not, I mean, when we changed to Kanban, some of the people in the teams were very much against that. But they weren't saying, look guys, let's drop this, let's go back, let's write some requirements documents and we'll do waterfall. No, they were saying, oh, come on, please, can we go back to Scrum? And so there's definitely progress.
After kind of leading the team that way and kind of force feeding this, after you left, what's the sort of trajectory that they were on then? I mean, do you know whether they, did they sort of stop improving or?
You have some contact with
Can
Scrum
I
Master?
say something about that? We actually trained some of the Scrum Masters who took over eventually, and the so-called core team that has continued. I've had some contact with them. They're trying very hard, but they're under serious pressure. Because the pressures from the business basically to go back to a sense of a false sense, by the way, of knowing what to expect when is very, very strong. And the team we left behind, although they're very able people, they're young. And it's a politically difficult situation. So they're definitely trying, and the team itself knows what they need to do, but they're having difficulty doing in that situation.
The surrounding organization
have also major changes.
So at the start you brought everyone to the same office, which is what you need to do. Was this plan to be everyone in the same office for the duration of the whole project, or was this sort of a setup to get people later on working remotely and working together?
Initially, we just said everybody needs to work in Amsterdam. One of the teams was from somewhere else in Holland. One of the teams came from London. And specifically the team from London very quickly had a serious problem with coming to Amsterdam. They had no preparation. They had to come, and they were there 5 days a week. So within a month or two, basically, they were very vocal about the difficulties of this. So we went into a rotation, and every second week, a person was at home, if you like, and worked from their home office. So we had, and that was difficult, very difficult, because then we had to do planning and retros with people off-site. But they have been on board and on-site long enough, and they were coming back every second week, that the relationships were strong enough to even get through the difficulties with the remote.
So you changed the Kanban in response to the product owner not sticking to priorities effectively, and that's kind of a standard pattern that happens a lot. But as soon as you got such a change in mindset from conditioning the team to Scrum, did you not try to condition the product owner to stick to his priorities?
Yeah, but
Rather than just change.
well, the product owner didn't stick to priorities. The product owner, we actually got into a different phase for the project, right? Because we were in production. It was not so much that the product owner didn't want to stick to priorities; it was that he couldn't. No, seriously, most of the work that was coming in directly from end users. So he could make them wait, of course, but that would have been very expensive, and this, I think, was a better solution.
We did initially. We tried to say, look, it's a planning horizon of a week. Come on, you must be able to stick to that. But the political pressure was very high, as Wouter mentioned. People were saying these delays could actually cost us big. It's very, very difficult to counter that with, I don't care. If you can't plan for a week, then you have a problem. So,
Final question here.
What was the actual advantage to continuing with geographically diverse teams?
what do you mean?
As in, why continue having your people in London rather than pull them all in-house?
Well, they were all pulled to Amsterdam.
Yeah, and then they you said there was a
They
rotation.
went-
But
yeah.
you still retain that team.
Right.
Yeah, we still retain the team. The team consisted of specialists of different
specialisms.
companies. We
Not
actually
just
got
specialisms, but it's a classic example of Conway's Law. These were
Oh, yeah.
vendors supplying components in the system. So there was nobody else who could supply these components except this company, and they were based in London.
So there wasn't an advantage, it was hands were tied.
Absolutely.
Okay.
and we got a few people from closer by, but that was Germany. So not really very much of an improvement also for those people. Still quite a commute.
That's Kenan. Brilliant example in practice. Thanks everybody for your attention.